Frans Timmermans. I will give you water while my colleague gives you a microphone. So Frans, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
I'm glad you had time in your very busy schedule, I guess.
Yeah, in this country they refer to me jokingly as the climate pope. And in this church I feel more than a pope than any time before.
I can understand that. Yeah, it's a nice church to be the pope of, I think. Yeah. So in my introduction, and people might be thinking I'm bluffing, but I have been told that you actually are a very gadget-loving man.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Yeah. Can you tell me about your latest gadget? What do you like?
Well, the Sonos came out with a new speaker recently, and I really needed to understand how that speaker works. I haven't bought it yet, but those are the things I really. There's the German newspaper FAZ. Mm-hmm. They have a special section on technique and cars, and I check that section every day to see what new gadget has come on the market.
See, he's one of us. He's a nerd, really. Yeah, dressed as a politician.
Well, I'm one of those nerds who is strictly humanities oriented. You know, I would fail any course in the technical studies at this university. I'm more of a history, languages, law man, but I love to see the results of what all these smart people put on the table, you know, and this is what this day and age is so fascinating about, that the latest technological developments can really make our lives easier. And part of the technological development is to reduce the threshold for ordinary people to have access to these technologies. Yeah. So it's also a form of democratization of technology that the university is working on.
Yeah, so you obviously believe that innovation is one of the solutions we might need to implement to make this world a better place.
Yes, in combination with our own behavior. You know, technical solutions will not drive the change if the change is not supported by the people. So that's where it starts. Technical solutions are an instrument, they're not a goal per se or in themselves. If there's no political willingness or societal willingness to change, even the most brilliant technical solutions will not be applied.
Yeah, I agree. So before I go on, because I have two more interesting questions that I would like to ask, I would like to mention that this is actually a Q&A session. So after my few questions, you are allowed to ask him anything. Yeah, nice questions or maybe critical questions, you can ask him anything. So we have like 10 or 15 minutes for that, so be prepared. But I will start off with my first few questions. So you just mentioned that changing behavior is a very big part of the change in the world we need. Now, I wonder, because changing behavior is something that always comes with a lot of critique, with a lot of people not really being happy about the change, or being afraid that it will actually make their lives worse. So how do you convince people to help them change?
Well, I mean, that's one of the most important political questions of today. And it's been made difficult exactly for the reason you mentioned. I think we're now in the first time in European history, since, let's say, the Second World War, that parents believe their children will be worse off than they are themselves. So it's the first time that the predominant feeling is one of decline. And if the predominant feeling is one of decline, what you do psychologically is you try to safeguard what you have. And you see every innovational change you see as a direct threat to what you have. So we need to take people ourselves out of that psychological situation. And we need to combine long-term goals with short-term steps that benefit ordinary citizens. So to be very concrete, we need to show that the energy transition profits everyone, not just the people who can afford to buy solar panels or electric cars, but also people who think they can't afford it. They should be supported to have the same benefits, solar panels on their roofs, even if they rent a house, more energy efficient housing, so that they see their energy bills going down. Then they see this transition does not only benefit, you know, the tofu eating Tesla driver, it benefits me as well.
Yeah, but how do you get that message across? I mean, you can tell them, or you can tell everybody.
Showing. Telling is not going to work. Showing. Just, you know, have agreements to stay in the same subject with the housing corporations in the Netherlands, how much money do you need to bring your housing stock up 2-3 notches, so that, and it doesn't have to be perfect immediately. Going from G to D, or from D to C, or from D to B is already a huge win for people who live in those houses. And then you have to ask the corporations, what do you need from us? How much money will it cost? What is it in regulation that makes it difficult for you? What can we change in that? And then within literally years, you can show the benefits. Don't forget that within 1 year in Europe, we increased solar energy generation with 40%, 40, in 1 year, under the pressure of enormously high energy prices, of course, but the benefits are lower bills, but also lower emissions.
Yeah, actually the Netherlands is doing very well lately as well, right, with solar panels?
It is,
finally.
But these are the people, these are very often the people who can afford to do that. Now we have to reach out immediately to the people who cannot, and put them in the same position. This day and age is the fundamental question of our time, is the question, the eternal political question of redistribution. We have to rethink the idea of redistribution. We have to redefine what we see as a fair society. We have to redefine how people perceive that what we do is not for the few, but for the many. And the many believe that what we're doing is too much for the few. And we need to change that paradigm. That's much, much more important than just only thinking about new technological innovations.
Yeah. So now I've spoken to a lot of companies about the changes we have to make, and obviously they always say, well, innovation is important, but as long as the new innovations, the sustainable innovations, are more expensive than the technology that we're used to, let's say electric driving or vegetarian meat substitutes, as long as they're more expensive, people will not be eager to buy them. So in what sense should politicians change those pricings?
Well, I just, when you were asking your question, I was thinking back on a couple of conversations I had about exactly this subject with Bill Gates, who thinks a lot about these things. And he defines it always as premium. How do you reduce the premium? And I think this is the fundamental question. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we still needed to reduce the premium on solar energy. 3 years ago, we still needed to reduce the premium on offshore wind energy. Now these things are paying for themselves because they're so much cheaper than the alternatives in fossil fuels. But had we not reduced the premium, we wouldn't have gotten there. So we need to look at the technologies of the future and devise political systems together with the private sector and the banking sector, and especially also international financiers, how we can reduce the premium and give a trajectory to the point where the premium will no longer be necessary. And in these new technologies, the premium period is much shorter than in the older technologies. So it should be an incentive for all parties to be involved in this, but we need a plan. How do you reduce the premium?
Yeah. Now, then my last question would be, you have this idea, these great ideas, we have the innovations, we have some solutions, but now we have to confess the politicians in Brussels. How do you do that? Behind the scenes, fighting.
Well, the art of diplomacy is to understand the position of the person you negotiate with better than they do understand their own position. That is the real art of diplomacy, to know exactly what is really important to them, to distinguish the bluster and the negotiating tactics from what the real core issues are, and then you come up with a proposal that strikes a balance between what is essential for you and essential for them, if you agree on the ultimate goal. And so, to give you an example, very concrete example, we have increased and enlarged the emissions trading system, which is, I think, globally the best instrument to put a price on carbon. Industries used to it, those industries that have been working more than a decade with it, and we've now enlarged it also to transport and housing. Everybody told me at the outset, impossible. You'll have the whole of Europe in yellow vests, it's not going to work. So what we did from the outset is to say, so why are people against this? Because they think they can't afford it. So then we said, what if we would create a climate social fund that would be funded by parts of the revenues of the ETS system, so that you can demonstrate to the people who can't be part of it because they can afford it, that you can support them, so that they are part of this. And this was the core of the deal that got me a majority in the European Parliament and a majority in the Council of Ministers of the European Union. It is always bringing together two, in principle, contradictory goals and bringing them together under one heading so that they reinforce each other. That's the, I hesitate to say it, but I'll say it anyway, that's the art of the deal.
So it's actually about also taking away their fears and trying to translate that to another solution.
Fears is taking away their fears sounds irrational. But this is not fears, this is interests. These are rational interests, these are concrete rational interests. And this is, you know, I know it's not your intention, but I want to put an emphasis on this. We can talk a lot about fears, but the danger is if you start defining people's interests as fears, you dismiss their interests. So you have to always look at their interests. And of course fear is a very potent political instrument. Perhaps today the most potent because of what I said earlier, people fear decline. So when you can instrumentalize people's fears, you talk to their lizard brain. And when you can talk to somebody's lizard brain, he or she will see confirmation of their fear absolutely everywhere. And that's when you can no longer talk about interests. So I want to bring it back to talking about concrete interests and delivering on the concrete interests of those people who are reluctant to go into a certain direction.
Super interesting. Thank you very much. Who in the crowd is eager to ask a question? I have this beautiful microphone that I can throw in a nice way. Yeah, someone here? I'll actually give it to you as a train driver. Who wants next? Oh, can I throw that far? Shall I try? Who? Okay. A girl with the koptelefoon? Wait, yeah, be careful. Nice catch.
Great throw.
Thank you.
So I just have a question about curiosity, because I think as a policymaker, not normally you should think about long-term or some broader visions. You just give an example about the chain reactions of how the energy bills actually impact the people. So I'm just wondering that is there some thought about some maybe restrictions? For example, I would like to describe another chain reaction, like if because Europe is a high-tech country, or like Netherlands is advanced on agriculture. Is there any thought about like reductions of the product over here? Because I think Netherlands also exports a lot of products, food, agriculture products. The reductions from here might cause a chain reaction that open a market that some people are still needs those products, and then causing like some people in the South America are cutting off their rainforest, actually trying to make products that fulfill in that market, but with lower efficiency or even cause more problem. I mean, as a European Union, it's such a big influence political party, political components. I think maybe some policymakers is there any thought about those long-term or broader vision of the impact that might be?
Is the question clear to you? Because it was quite hard for me to understand. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me try and pick up on some of the points you've made, sir. First of all, what I've seen happening over the last 3 years is that the realization that the climate crisis stops nowhere is now global. So what we had until, let's say, 3 years, some countries in what is referred to, and please, all these smart people here, help us find a better term than global south, but for efficiency, I'll use the term again. The idea very often was, yeah, but you know, you've had your turn, now it's our turn, don't bother us, you're the major emitters, we now want to get there. That is completely gone, because those countries who have a very, very marginal impact on global emissions suffer more than any other country of the effects of the climate crisis. And some countries are literally on the verge of disappearing in the Pacific. So just to make the point that the urgency felt in this climate crisis is now global. There's no disputing that anymore. And you even see that climate deniers are changing tack. They can't deny it anymore, so they try and confuse people. So that's an old political maxim from President Truman: if you can't convince them, confuse them. And that's what you see happening now on that side. So if this is perceived as truly global problem that doesn't stop at anybody's door, also thinking in terms of solution becomes a more global approach. And especially food security then becomes a huge issue. Just imagine, for argument's sake, that we would indeed get about 10 billion people on this planet. If you then also know that certain areas of the planet will no longer be able to produce food because of climatic changes, it's already happening, by the way, desertification, erratic weather patterns. Drought is one of the biggest challenges humanity faces right now, and also in Europe, by the way. So if you know all that, you also know we will need to be much smarter about how we produce our food, which is technological innovation should play a much, much bigger role. And that is across the board. And since what I said in the beginning, I truly believe this. Since the high tech is becoming low threshold and lower threshold every day, I don't think it is a utopia to say that all farmers across the world at some point will be able to link into satellite systems that will tell them exactly where they need to put their fertilizers, exactly where they need, when they need to sow, and exactly how the weather is going to develop. We will need new breeding techniques to help us make more resilient crops. We will need to even go down to pixel agriculture, so very small areas with very specific crops, combining crops so that the crops contribute to improving our biodiversity, because now the way we perform agriculture, 60% of the soil in Europe is in a bad shape, and nothing grows on a dead soil. So, and why is it in a bad shape? Because we're not watching the water levels, we're using too many pesticides, we're using too many of the same crops, we're trying to get too many yields. All of that, the intensification of agriculture is now become a problem and a challenge. And there are technological solutions to this, but we have to have the audacity to share those solutions across the planet, also with emerging countries and other countries. This should be accessible to all farmers. We should be aligned with the farmers, not with the feedstock industry, not with the fossil fuel industry, not with other big industries that profit from the present model. We should be aligned in creating a credible, prosperous future for our farming communities. That is the way forward, and I hope we can do this together in the years to come.
Thank you very much. You know, there's actually ESA satellite data being used to help farmers in the global south?
Yeah, yes, there is. And when I was in Africa recently at a conference, I also offered to African countries low threshold, cost-effective access to Copernicus. Copernicus is the best way of, globally, the best way of monitoring what's happening. And you can do it on a very, very precise area. And you can help them with forestry, fighting deforestation, see where it happens, reforesting parts of the planet. So there's so much we can do with these technologies.
I'm glad you know. I think I have to stop. I'm looking at you also, the press officer. Can I, one more question now? Okay, unfortunately, this was the end. He gets very good answers, but but we only have like a few questions. Or do you want one more question?
Let's do one.
Let's do one more, yeah. Okay, last question. Better be a good one. Yeah. I'm throwing. Thank you.
I mean, people like me always make the protocol people the bad guys, and it's so unfair because they're doing such a tremendous job.
And I need them too, because I'm horrible at keeping the time, so...
Yes, we are talking here about European technology, and that's at least what you are standing for. And I like to understand how we want to protect ourselves, because we had 20 years a beautiful mobile industry with Ericsson and Siemens and Nokia, and this all disappeared and went all to American companies, Apple and Google with Android. And now we see the same thing happening in the car industry. I think we are overflooded with American cars, Tesla, Chinese cars, and the German, and I see a protected way of European trying to withhold them with all this new technology. So what is the viewpoint of the European Commission about
I hope we have the capacity to learn from our mistakes. I remember, why did Nokia and Ericsson, I remember Hillary Clinton telling me, you have one phone. I say, yeah, my phone works here in the US as well as in Europe. I have to carry out 3 phones because we're not on the global, what's it called again, GSM system. That was at the time. But Nokia and Ericsson thought and said, handheld internet? Nah, it's not going to be a thing. So it was a decision. It was an analysis, a wrong analysis, thinking that handheld computers would not be a thing. And that's why, we were overtaken by Apple and Microsoft and others. The car industry, another example, exactly the same thing. When 15 years ago, especially in Korea, and then in China, and then in the US, people started developing electric cars. Oh, come on. We are the continent of the engineers. We will amaze you with ever more efficient diesel engines and petrol engines. So it was also a form of look at how many cars we're selling in China. It was a form of European hubris. No, we know better. We will continue. And so we're lagging behind. We're catching up. We're catching up. And the other lesson you didn't mention, which I want to mention, is the story of the solar panels. All of that was invented here and then marketed in China, and then we lost it. So that's why now, in our Industrial Act, we say we still have, in several technologies, we're still ahead of others. In electrolyzers, in some ways in solid-state batteries and new battery technologies, as you know and Twente very well, in some other areas, some areas of telecom and other areas. And what we're now saying is, when we invest in electrolyzer development, not just the development, we also say 40% of those electrolyzers need to be European when you buy them. So you create a production chain from the development right to the manufacturing and the sales. And also, the experience we've had, the Netherlands thought we never needed any industrial policy anymore for a long, long time. But then, look at what the smart people in the Eindhoven region thought about. Let's create a place where you invent things and then create a biosphere around it where you also make these things. So you need the smartest people at the technical universities, but you also need the people who are going to make it. So you need to connect the highest level of education with all levels of education. You need to fund that publicly, but also from the private sector. Well, we call it now a very fancy name, triple helix, and it works. And this is the thing we need to do at the European level. Take Eindhoven as an example, take Twente as an example, expand on that. And I think that will give us the technological base we need. And then we also have to be more creative in terms of thinking of our economic supply chains and production chains. Why not work with the emerging countries, especially in Africa, to create these chains? Why can't we build more solar panels in Africa? Why can't we install electrolyzer capacity in Africa? Bring the capacity to the places on this planet where there's more sun than anywhere else, where there's more wind than anywhere else, and you can generate enormous amounts of renewable energy. You can store that in hydrogen, transport it across the world, etc., etc. This is the way we need to be thinking. We need to make sure our industrial base in this industrial revolution reinvents itself.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions, all of you, and give one more round of applause for the